if you really believe that you're an infinite being with unlimited potential, then why would you put a limitation on yourself?
Welcome back to another episode of Voices of the Goddess, where brilliant women come to take a break from their successful and sometimes overwhelming lives to level up, live free, and create abundance.
If your hectic life has you feeling a bit lost, if you're building your career, brand, or business, or if you simply want to get the most out of life, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Julietta Wenzel, founder of Body and Soul PT and Soul Candy.
And I'm your co-host, Graciela Laurent, professional portrait photographer specializing in boudoir and personal branding.
Whether you're relaxing with a cup of coffee or running around town, we've got you.
Whatever you're doing, thanks for bringing us along and sharing a laugh.
Here comes the magic.
Hi, kids.
Hello, I'm not your kid.
Hey, everybody's my kid. I am the mother to all, and you all are my children. I love you all.
There you go.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. The only thing that's funny is that because I am a bit older than you, so.
Well, you know, that's all just made up anyway.
It is all made up. It is all made up. One of the messages that I've received recently from my guides is that time, like we always say, like time's not real, but like how we measure time, that is scarcity mentality.
Yeah.
And that basically anything that we're measuring is a bit of a manifestation of scarcity. So
that totally resonates. Anytime that I watch the clock, it never feels good. Like it's always an anxiety-based checking of the time. I never look at the time and go, oh, I feel so wonderful. As a matter of fact, years ago when I was in my 20s, well, ever since I was a kid, I would wear a watch, right? And then somewhere in my mid-20s, I stopped wearing a watch because I realized that wearing a watch actually made me anxious. So I would leave my house and I had like a 45-minute commute to work every day, like 3 different highways and, the whole thing. And I had the kind of job where you had to like clock in. So if you were 1 minute late or 7 minutes, I don't know, whatever the time was, like something terrible would happen, you'd get a mark on your permanent record, whatever nonsense it was. And of course, growing up like that in school, the bell rings, right? Like there's all these time things. And so I just stopped wearing a watch because I was like, I can't. Once I leave my house, I am in earnest going as fast as I possibly can to get to work. Like it's not like I'm wasting my time. And I would find that as I'm in traffic, I would check my watch constantly. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, if once I leave my house, that's it. I'm doing my very best. And I get there when I get there, for whatever reason, traffic has always been part of my story.
Well, I'm curious, you just recently went on your mountain vacation. Did time disappear while you were on vacation?
Truly, it really was amazing. And I have to tell you that one of the biggest realizations I had, our cabin was kind of towards the top of a mountain. And so from the driveway down the mountain to like the main road, it took 10 minutes, right? And it's 10 minutes of winding roads and there's nothing but trees on either side. I don't know why when they make the path, it's never big enough for 2 cars to pass. It's always just like 1.5 big, So not only do you have to pay attention so you don't like fall off the side, but you have to pay attention because there's a corner and there's more cars coming. And the first couple times up and down the mountain, as we've vacationed in this way over the years, I was really nervous about it. I was very anxious. And this time I just had a totally different experience. I don't know if it's because it was 60 every time I opened the window, or it's because I could hear the birds and hear the trees and all of that. But, I thought to myself, man, if I could take these 10 minutes of going up and down the mountain every day, I could like reach enlightenment by the time I hit the first red light. Because it was just so like, you couldn't be on your phone. You can't be multitasking. You have to focus only on the one thing, which is driving. And even that, once you're used to it, that part melts away. So then it's really just an easy coast and perfect weather through the trees. And I don't know. I just felt like, man, this is it. Like if this was my commute, if this was how I could do my everyday, this is glorious. What a great way to get in the car and just spend the first 10 minutes relaxed and not worried about the guy behind you, the guy in front of you. What time is it? Got to get to school, and look what time it is, and the kids aren't there yet. And you know, like, I don't know. It was just great. So, you know, my question now is, how do I take those 10 minutes and put them into my city life? You know, how do I leave my house now and get that same experience without the trees, without the birds, and the addition of all the cars that are beeping and doing their thing? So I'm working on it.
Maybe we'll put like trees on your windows so that you have like this perception that they're there.
That, and I am very intentional with my morning commute music. You know, I don't listen to talk radio or any of that stuff. Although if you're driving, you should totally be listening to our podcast, but whatever, we're funny. But I do listen to like the sounds of the forest, you know, or a meditation style, you know, music, just to take the edge off. I don't know. What do you do? What do you do to make your commute pleasant?
In the car, I'm most of the time when I'm in the car, I'm listening to either our podcast to see like how we sounded, reminding me of. And that's one thing I have to say. Like recently, I'm like, wow, that was a great podcast. I'm impressed with us, if I do say so myself. We've had so many amazing, wonderful guests on. Like, so if you're listening to this one, like check out all the other shows too. Like, there's so much good information. These guests are sharing from their hearts, and just lots of good stuff in there. So I listen to our podcast and I listen to other podcasts, see what other people are doing out there. And there's just so much good stuff out there.
Yeah, I think, you know, we really never get to sit and reflect on our guests. But honestly, this could turn into a 5-hour podcast because our guests are so special. And I don't just say that. I mean, like you guys out there should know that, like, yes, sometimes we seek out guests, but most of the times the universe just brings them to us. And it's always the perfect thing that I needed to hear that day, you know, and they're so incredible that the time we spend together is really just scratching the surface. Like, that's why we always put stuff in the show notes, because there's so much more to get out of these relationships. Like, I wish we all just lived together so I could just pop on over to, you know, my guest house and hang out, you know?
Yep. Well, speaking of guests, let's take a short break here and then we will bring on our next guest.
Let's do it.
It's tough trying to have it all, isn't it? You're successful, super busy, mostly happy, but something's missing.
We know what's missing. Lean in. It's you.
It's the authentic expression of yourself.
It is time to uncover your true self and create the fulfillment, joy, peace, and freedom that you crave.
Introducing our life-changing retreat, designed exclusively for women who are ready to release self-doubt, find balance, and embrace their authentic selves.
Join us as we embark on a journey where the magic of Mexico will ignite your spirit and set your soul free, I promise.
Nestled in the heart of Mexico, the captivating beauty of San Miguel de Allende provides a magical setting for our retreat and a sanctuary for women seeking profound change in their lives.
Our facilitators will guide you through a series of empowering workshops, enlightening ceremonies, and rejuvenating practices, all carefully curated by us to empower you to let go of self-doubt and step into your true potential.
Each day you'll be surrounded by the warmth of like-minded women ready to embrace self-discovery and all of life's possibilities.
And what's cool is that together you'll form an unbreakable bond, supporting and inspiring each other as you navigate the path towards a more fulfilled and empowered life.
There's plenty of alone time set aside for you introverts so you can recharge and rejuvenate.
Amen. The retreat venue itself is one of a kind. Imagine a sprawling acreage nestled at the foot of a volcano. It also has botanical gardens, sacred spaces for ceremonies, and reflection.
It also has a magnificent dedicated spa room made entirely of quartz crystals, and a sauna and a cold plunge pool.
That's totally me. I'm in the sauna. There's even a therapeutic donkey living there. I'm so excited.
Can't wait to meet the donkey. Plus, every culturally rich meal is cooked for you. All you have to do is sit down and enjoy the experience.
I'm sorry, home-cooked meals in Mexico?
Yay!
So we'll also visit natural hot springs, check out the pyramids, do an easy nature hike, and we're gonna explore San Miguel de Allende.
But the highlight of this trip is going to be Dia de los Muertos.
It is a time-honored tradition. City streets filled with painted faces. It's not just an homage to your ancestors, it's a celebration of the new you.
And it's all included.
Woo! So imagine coming back home and waking up each day knowing that you have the tools to create a life that brings you joy every single day.
And it's all within reach.
So the time is now and space is limited.
So visit our website at votgpodcast.com to learn more and reserve your spot.
I promise you, the journey to a more fulfilled and empowered life starts here.
We can't wait to create this magical experience with you.
See you soon.
Hello, Matthew. Welcome to the show.
Hello, my pleasure for being in the presence of more goddesses.
Woo. So we know who you are, but our audience doesn't. So if you would please take a minute to introduce yourself, tell them a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what keeps you passionate about doing what you do.
Yeah, thank you. Passion is the key word. I help my clients reclaim their power by bringing passion and purpose back to their life. And I always was a religious person when I was younger, and then kind of got disenfranchised, as many of us have, still seeking, though, my relationship with a higher power, with my own spirituality, and happened upon the ancient mystery schools and the metaphysical path, trying to develop my psychic gifts and be an amazing remote viewer or something. And I realized this was all about me becoming the better version of myself. And so since then, the last 9 years, I've been a guide, a spiritual guide in the mystery school, helping others achieve a relationship that is conscious, daily, and energized with their higher spiritual guidance so they can live their best life.
Can you tell our audience a little bit? Because I think everybody knows what the mystery schools are, and then I realize that not everybody does. So can you tell everybody a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, sometimes I hesitate to throw out some of those words just because it's really not well known. And some people think they know and then they don't, because there's actually a lot of terrible information on the internet. Go figure. And really what this is about, right? Really what this is about, like I mentioned, is here's the thing that people do know thyself. Kind of resonates with people, like, oh, I heard that somewhere. And one of the places you probably heard that was in relation to what was an ancient mystery school, the Oracle at Delphi, or the Delphic mysteries. And the reason why that was such an important phrase in now the whole mystery school tradition the world over is because in order to take advantage of or even really understand what the Oracle was telling you in response to your question, because you went to the Oracle with a question, right? And then the Oracle would give you an answer. But if you didn't know thyself, if you didn't know who you truly were, if you didn't know your purpose in life, or like we say in the mystery school, the degree, measure, and order of your place in the universe, then the answer wouldn't really help you. The answer was for your higher self. The answer was for who you truly are. And if you're not living who you truly are, then the answer might not make sense. But the Oracle Delphi always saw you who you were meant to be. And so the easiest way to describe what the mystery school is as a worldwide organization that comes in many forms and many ways to people, depending on their context and what culture they're coming from, or all those various things. The easiest way to summarize it is it's helping you to become who you were meant to be. And as a spiritual guide, kind of the greatest privilege of my life is to see people as their ideal selves and to help them become aware that that's who they truly are, and to really bring that out again in their daily life.
So what does that look like? What does it look like to work with you in that way?
Yeah, I would like to say that there is a program and a path that I take everyone through, but the reality is that's totally not true. Everyone is unique. Everyone is different. And while there is a path, the mystery school talks about, let's do a life activation. This is going to open up all the possibilities of your DNA coding. Let's do an initiation to our tradition that's going to provide expansion of your energy field and protection and all these other things. These are really just milestones. And just as if you were walking your own hike up the mountain, or I heard you talking about your drive down the mountain from your cabin, everyone's going to see different things. They're going to experience different things. Some people are going to stop and smell the flowers. Some people are going to run down the hill, or up the hill in this case, if we're going to the top of the mountain. And, the reality is I don't know exactly how it's going to occur for you, but I know that you're going to experience results when you hit these milestones. And it's kind of the art of it is to figure out when it's appropriate now to take that next step. Because for me, I'm a big, I need to know things person before I make a choice. And, I had the opportunity to help start actually a Tibetan Buddhist temple in Ohio with one of my mentors when I was 18 years old. And at the time, they were traveling to come consecrate this temple with the lineage holder of the tradition. And he brought with him a full retinue of monks. It was, 30 monks of various roles and responsibilities to support the lineage holder, who would basically providing essentially an initiation in the Tibetan mystery school to this temple. And he brought with him a tulku, which in the Tibetan culture is a ascended master embodied in the flesh. And so my mentor was like, "You're going to have an audience with him." And I'm like, "No, I'm not. That sounds really intense." And she says, "Yes, you are. And in fact, it's happening right now," and pushes me into the room. So I'm all of a sudden sitting there in front of this Tibetan tulku, who of course is, majestic in this relatively disorganized office, because my mentor was a college professor turned Buddhist nun, essentially, and her husband was still a college professor. Anyway, you can imagine a college professor's office with papers everywhere and kind of a sort of disorganization in the air. But anyway, he's sitting there very pristine, and I was like, I don't even know if this guy speaks English. But anyway, long story short, he provides some valuable advice to me, which is to choose one tradition and go deep. And at the time I was 18, so I was like, thanks. You look like a very wise person, and I appreciate that advice, and I'm definitely not taking that advice. Because for the next 10 years, I'm like, I'm not going to choose one tradition and dive deep at 18 years old. I have like no life experience. I have no idea what's going on in the world. I grew up in a 100-acre farm in Ohio. I got a lot of life to live, So it wasn't until 29 that I decided, okay, Saturn return happened. Actually, it's more like my Saturn return, like 27 and a half, 28. It's time for me to choose. And at the time, it was either to Tibetan Buddhist religion, which I was still studying, or the Western Hermetic tradition. And I decided to dive deep into the Western Hermetic tradition. But the point is, I seek, and I did the surveying that a lot of people do. I studied with many teachers. I've lived and traveled abroad, both in South America and China for over a year, respectively. And there's so much out there. Some of the best teaching I got was in my own backyard, where I was living in the States. I was living in Portland, Oregon for 14 years. So, you never know where you're going to find it. But definitely, go with an open heart and an open mind, and you'll get something. And as a spiritual guide, I always tell people, don't believe me. Go out there and try it for yourself. See what works. Throw out the rest. I'm not offended by that. It's your life. It's your DNA coding, which is unique. And again, you're going to do and use these tools in your own unique ways. I'm just here to support whatever that is.
I love that, because it's the same thing when a client calls me and asks me, how am I going to help them with their pain? And, every person is unique. So your session is going to be unique to you. I can't, without you coming in here and experiencing it, I can't tell you what it's going to be. When you get here, your body is going to show us what it needs to move along the path of healing. And I think as humans, oftentimes we want like everything, like we want to know exactly what the recipe is and how it's going to go down. And like you said, everybody's completely unique. And so everything that we choose to do should be unique to each of us. And
of course, our attentions, for better or for worse, due to technology, would be my argument, are very much shorter than they used to be. And, the reality of trying to compress a 5,000 plus year old lineage into a 45-second soundbite to get someone interested it's just not practical, So the reality is I'm tailoring my message to you. I'm tapping into you specifically. If you're in front of me and you're coming genuinely and authentically with a question about like, hey, I'm really struggling with this, and typically people don't come to me first. It's not the first thing people do. It's like, let's go out and find the local mystery school to solve my spiritual issues. So they've tried stuff before they've come, and that's great, because in order for them to really see what it is I have to show them, it's not mine, but to show them, because this is a lineage that's been around for thousands of years. I remind people, I didn't create these classes. I didn't create these sessions. This isn't, Matt's wisdom school that I made up last year, during the pandemic or whatever. It's something that's been around and has stood the test of time. And that's what I hang my hat on. Like, I know from my lived experience this stuff works. It's my opportunity to show you, if you do these things, you might notice that these things work. And at the end of the day, we're going to create a program. We're going to create a way of working with these ancient tools to adapt them to your life, to, make them practical for what your lived experience is, what your goals and needs are, And I'm on my own path too, right? So I'm not perfect. In fact, our teacher, one of our main teachers in the lineage, he is now the lineage holder of the school. The lineage holder passes on, of course, from generation to generation. And so he's the kind of the newest sovereign teacher, master teacher. We call them Absissimus. Absissimus wrote a book called You Are Not Perfect the Way That You Are, which, of course, caused a lot of people in the kind of woke / spiritual realms like, oh, but, you are perfect the way you're. It's like, no, like, if you think about it, if you think that you're perfect now, where is there to go? And why go study in a mystery school? You don't need us. Like, that's kind of not the point, right? Even if you are perfect, we're all seeking growth. And so even to admit that there's somewhere to grow means you're not perfect. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I don't think anyone wants to be held to a standard of perfection anyway. So, it's funny how kind of confronting some of these teachings are, but when you really think about it, you're like, actually, that kind of works. This is actually putting me into the place where I can obtain the most growth, where I can have the most potential. And that's really what the mystery school is about. It's not saying we're the only way, but we find that our way is very effective in getting people to move along their path, along their trajectory. Some people don't want that. They're very comfortable where they are. More power to you. But when you get to that point where you're ready to move and you've tried a few other things, and you're ready to try something that works, the mystery school has been around for 5,000 years because it works.
I love your message of listen, don't listen to me, try it yourself and see for yourself. I first heard that studying in the Buddhist tradition as well. And I found that so comforting because there's so many other ideas and methodologies that are, it's my way or the highway. And I find like anything that doesn't flow, anything that's a block, anything that's a no, just doesn't feel good, right? And I think there's a lot of comfort in understanding that everything is a path, that everything is constantly moving and changing and growing. And like, let's release this idea that there's one answer, that there's one way, that there's just one thing. Like there isn't. There's a lot of things. What works for you? What belief feels good to you? Go ahead.
If you really believe that you're an infinite being with unlimited potential, then why would you put a limitation on yourself? And I think the thing that we have to struggle the hardest with, honestly, as a school is dogma. It's really easy to say, well, you all believe this, and so this is the only thing you believe, and so there's no room for, something else. And the founder of the school, the school in North America was founded in 1997. So the school was opened up in 1997, because often mystery schools are closed simply for the reason that it's very easy to label mystery schools. It's a cult, or it's a religion, or, or they believe this thing and no other. And I don't want to get involved in all that. It's really easy to label a mystery school like that if you haven't really done the inquiry to have your own experience. If you rely on other people's experience, then you're probably not good for the mystery school, because mystery school relies on your experience, not other people's experience. But anyway, it's easy to like shoot arrows at people who are trying to stand up for empowerment in a world that is kind of designed to disempower you. But when it comes to, understanding what is going to be right for you, you are your own best teacher there. And being able to open up and really trust your own guidance, that's really scary for people. There's a lot of fear associated with taking back our power. And that's one of the things that I really spent a lot of time focused on, particularly in our culture, because we're in 53 countries. So, different cultures have different issues. In the American culture, it's all about power, sex, money, fame. and all of these things that are mostly ephemeral, that are mostly, constantly changing, really. And so one of the most powerful teachings, and this is how I open each Empower Thyself class, which is all of our foundational teachings in 2 days. In the Empower Thyself program, I kind of open with, the irony of today's spiritual study is that in order to respond to and understand and really adapt to the constant and increasing rates of change in our culture, is to step back and tap into the timeless and the changeless aspects of who we truly are.
I'm like, it's so deep. Like you have to sit there and let it process before you can move forward.
You need to slow down. I was telling Julieta before she invited me onto the podcast. Thank you again to both of my lovely hosts here, Gabriela and Julieta. The message I've been getting is to do less, which is really hard for me. As a serial entrepreneur, this isn't the only thing I do, by the way. I have businesses that I run and manage, and teams that I run and manage. My background's in team management and leadership development and corporate consulting and all those kinds of lovely things that are nothing that I want to spend my time on anymore. But I don't want to spend my time in corporate anymore. I love the communication aspects and things, but and coaching teams, obviously. But the reality is it's hard to do less when you have access to so much more information, Chat GPT that can write your essays for you. And, ostensibly, there's no reason why you can't when you have access to all of this information, right? And the reality is, well, there are reasons why I shouldn't, for me, and I wouldn't should on anyone else except myself, right? But for me, I need to focus, and I need to slow down, and I need to do the one thing, and I need to do it well. And everything about my environment and even my own inner desires don't necessarily want to do just the one thing, they want to do the multiple things. So it's a hard teaching, but if you think back, there's lots of mystery and wisdom traditions. I'm familiar with the Vedic tradition as well. I was fortunate to study the Vedic traditions in high school with a mentor, and they all say the same thing, focus on the one thing.
I think it was even, was it Einstein or somebody that said, thinking is work, like just sitting still and just looking out the window and thinking, like that's work. That's a thing. It doesn't mean you got to keep doing. You just got to,
I think that makes you pause and think. Then it's probably something that has merit, Sorry, go ahead, Gabrielle, cut you off.
No, that's good.
So we are creating a library for all of the goddesses, and we are curious about what book you want to add to our goddess library and why.
Yes, thank you for giving me some time. Not all of this is scripted or prepped. I actually, this was one of the questions I was given beforehand. I'm so glad I did have that time to prep, because I'm so excited to share. One of the things that we work on in the Mystery School is the archetypes. Archetypes are really important because they provide us in a sort of collective way to orient. We relate to each other through archetypes. We relate to each other through the relationships between those archetypes. And so it's really powerful. And a lot of magic outside of kind of the practical magic is archetypal. You'll hear it's called archetypal magic. Whereas if you're in a ceremony or a ritual, we're calling in a god or a goddess, and we're really connecting with that archetype because they, in a sense, represent an evolved version of ourselves. We are gods and goddesses in training. And when we connect with the archetypes of the god and goddesses out there in our ceremonies, in our, in the wheel of the year and the various passings of various cycles and traditions, it helps us to start to embody that in our daily life. So there's a book called Rediscovering the Archetypes of the Mature Masculine. And I thought that was a really relevant piece in today's dialogue or narrative. So the full title is King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. Here's the cover by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. And the subtitle is Rediscovering the Archetypes of the Mature Masculine. So right now the archetypes are under attack. And when the breakdown of when an archetype starts breaking down in a culture, people lose their orientation, because whether they're conscious of it or not, they're relating to the world through these archetypes. You know, king, warrior, magician, lover, they're a little maybe esoteric for people in our modern day, but father, mother, student, teacher, lover, boyfriend, girlfriend, you know, there's these roles we fill, and how do we fill them? Where do you get your ideas for filling them? Typically through story, typically through our social conditioning, the myth of our times, you know, haul back to, or throw back to Joseph Campbell, right? So we're all operating in this sort of ecosystem or collective consciousness of mythology, and the archetypes are a part of that. So if an archetype starts getting messed with, like, you know, this may be controversial to say, but having a female James Bond, for example, is messing with an archetype. And there's other ways where we mess with archetypes that they kind of lose the essence of their meaning if you start to make them all things to all people. You know, there's value in having an archetype that is a male archetype, and there's value in having an archetype that's a female archetype, and they don't need to be both. You know, there's a message, or there's a teaching in their orientation. If, like, right now I'm just calling out gender because it's such a big thing right now, and I'm happy to go deeper into that. But you know, there's these things that are happening in today's culture, and when we decouple some of the core aspects of, like, king versus queen, you know, for example, when you decouple them from some of their gender equivalents, and I don't mean gender like male, female, I mean like masculine and feminine energy, right? Everyone has masculine, everyone has feminine energy. When we start to decouple these things, you know, this is how we create. We create with masculine and feminine energy. You need both to create, and you need both to uncreate, actually, is another teaching of the mystery school. And so when you look at how are we messing with these archetypes, I'm curious to hear from you two your thoughts on how that might be impacting the conversations you're having with your audience or your clients.
The masculine feminine has been something that's been really showing up in, for myself personally. I know as a woman, I've spent the better part of my life really being dominated by the masculine energy. And, you know, some of it was just my life experiences and putting me into a role where I had to do everything. And, you know, I had a husband who was very absent. And so, you know, I was playing both roles in the relationship. And at some point I came along and was like, you know, I can't, it's putting me way out of balance. I need to reconnect with my sacred feminine side. And then, you know, so as it's happening in me personally, you know, then I'm becoming more aware of what's going on out there in the world, and just seeing how, you know, this patriarchal society that we live in has, like, it's so overly masculine, and then it's toxically masculine because, and I think it's led us to believe that masculine energy is bad, at least from a woman's perspective. And it's like, no, when the masculine energy is healthy and balanced, it's beautiful. But it's so difficult for men right now to operate in the divine masculine because they're overwhelmed by the toxic masculine. And so, you know, it's being played out in the world out there, and then it influences how it plays out in us. And, you know, this goes back to something we spoke at, you know, prior to one of the other episodes, like, how do we change that? And the only way that we change it is by changing ourselves. And so my contribution to help healing what's out there in the world is by me healing it within myself. And once I've healed it within myself, then sharing that with those around me and supporting them in healing that within themselves.
And I think it's also giving space for other people to do the same, right? Like, I'm a little more, I enjoy the fluidity of the feminine, masculine energy journey. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, some days I'm in my full feminine, and some days I need to bust out the masculine. You know what I mean? And I think for me, it feels good to know that I can ride the wave, you know? and have both of those things, and to deal with and handle and be whatever it is that I need to be in that moment, you know. I'm a live and let live kind of person generally. So, you know, it doesn't upset my apple cart when I meet or have like a masculine woman or a feminine man. Do you see what I mean? In my space. And I don't necessarily see it as an imbalance unless it's causing you pain. That's does that make sense? Right? Like if you live in that space and it feels really good to you, then I think that that's got to be the right thing, you know. So I'm interested like in your female James Bond analogy, because I was like, what? That's kind of interesting. And I hear you, I do. I just like, for me, I like being able to like I said, just flow those energies as needed, you know. And
I think you have to be balanced though to be able to flow. Because
Yeah.
like for me, I wasn't balanced. I
Yeah.
was like way too
100%.
in my masculine, and so I couldn't
100%.
flow. You have to create the balance so that you can flow.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your contributions, and I love having this conversation. And it is a dialogue, and there's no right answer here. So I want to be really clear with us and the audience. You know, I'm not here because I've made a decision or that I've come to conclusions about things. I love having this conversation because I'm learning something each time. And I think what doesn't happen is we don't have enough of these conversations. So again, thank you for having this podcast so that we can have a space to do this. But, you know, two things. One, Julietta, you talked about it. You know, one of the things to get is that the female, like the feminine energy is the beginning of creation. You know, creation starts with the feminine and moves into the masculine. And then we start to intertwine and weave. But creation starts on the feminine. And so as a female bodied person, you have basically more power, more energy. I mean, that's why in certain Wiccan traditions, the male bodied person can't achieve the highest level of that tradition. In a Wiccan coven, for example, in a Wiccan tradition, only the females can achieve the highest level of that system, because it's about creation from the mother. And so female bodied are just naturally oriented towards that better. They run that energy easier, and they have the ability to do everything the masculine can do. Females can do everything the guys can do, you know, but guys can't do everything the females can do. See, that's the natural distinction. The ability to create life and birth it from your body is something that a male bodied person will never be able to do. And so we'll never understand that. You know, there's nothing that we can do to understand what it's like to bear a child. And that's the physical difference, but there is energetic correlates to all that. And in the Hermetic tradition, we call it as above, so below. Anything you can learn from our physical experience will have an echo or a correlation on the energetic level. And so there is a correlation where there is things the female energy, the feminine energy can do. Now, feminine and masculine versus male female, right? So now we're talking about energy of masculine and feminine, which I think, you know, second point, we can all agree we all have both, right? I'm not saying, oh, I'm a male bodied person, so I should just have masculine energy. That's not what I'm saying at all. Of course I have feminine energy inside of me, and God help me if I didn't. I wouldn't be able to accomplish anything in my life if I didn't have both of those energies to work with. We all have both of those energies to work with. And then come in, you know, the third point here around, well, what is balance? Because remember, perfection, a state of perfection is actually a state of stagnation. Once you're perfect, there's nowhere to go. Similarly with balance, when we talk about balance in a metaphysics, remember sometimes the teaching's a little counterintuitive. Balance isn't 50-50. If you're 50-50, it's really hard to move. But if you're a little bit, let's say 70-30, which is kind of what we talk about as a sort of standard, you know, again, of course it moves, but if we kind of at least think of a baseline as like a 70-30 split, then there's enough pull in the system to be able to move, right? There's enough potential energy, right, to be able to make a move when you need to. And Gabrielle, I think you said it beautifully. Like, there's days when I just need to like bring out that masculine, you know, and I love that. I respect that, and that is the sign of actually a really well balanced person, when you can say, yeah, right now I need this. Let's pull it out. That's an empowered person. You know, that's a balanced person. That's a person that knows how to channel and use their energies. So if you didn't have the grounding though, right, back to Julietta's point, if you didn't have the grounding in like a template for where to start, which is our archetypes, what does the mature masculine look like? What does the mature feminine look like? Let's talk about that. Why is there no toxic femininity? There's toxic masculinity, but no toxic femininity. You know, those kinds of conversations. Well, that's what I'm just saying. The narrative, you know, you got to watch the narrative. And so the Hermetics, the metaphysics, we bring ourselves back to the source, the core. Like, what is emerging in the narrative, in the collective consciousness, as above, and how do we translate it into life lived? Because, yeah, we can only impact the world through changing ourselves. That's what we have control over. So below. Right? And so as above, so below teaches us to look at the world in a way that is empowered. Because if I just look at the society as a whole, I can't change that as a one person. But if I look at it as I'm part of this microcosm and what I do matters, because it does, it matters deeply, then I have power. Then I have the ability to make a change that, by the way, is going to impact every life I touch. And as healers, we have an even higher standard to hold ourselves to because we're actively impacting people so much greater. Any goddess, even if a goddess doesn't consider herself a healer, you're a healer. You're a woman in our society where we need nurture. We need compassion. Like, what happened to that? You know, talk about what do we call it? The male dominated higher, you know, culture. So, you know, we need the balance, you know, and it's really up to the women in some ways. Right. Yeah. The masculine's effed it up. Right. So it's up to the women to start to help us rebalance and relearn, you know, essentially the principles of matriarchal culture. Like, let's bring back understanding. Let's bring back compassion. Let's bring back, you know, patience and all these things that, you know, I'm not saying they're necessarily feminine traits, but I think that there's something that the feminine energy can do to help us rebalance. And we all need to, male-bodied or female-bodied, take on that task in our culture, is be responsible for balancing your world, whatever you can touch. And keeping in mind that balance isn't 50-50. It means the right mix, right, of the masculine and feminine that's going to serve all, primarily yourself, but serve all the people you touch.
And I, you know, thank you so much for saying that. And I love how you talk, like, you're so eloquent in how you speak. But I think if there's one message that comes across in every single episode, it's you have to start with yourself, right? Like, regardless of whatever else is going on in the world, you have to start with yourself. So I thank you for creating the space to help people move forward to do that, because that's really important. It's just one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Time has, speaking of time again, it has completely flown by here. I think, like you said earlier, Graciela, we could start having 5-hour episodes. But it is time to get things wrapped up. And so I'm just curious, Matthew, if you have some last golden nugget, some little tidbit to leave with our audience as a gift.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think there's the gift is to go back and watch this episode, particularly, and all these episodes, because there's so many gold nuggets. If you go back and listen to this, there's so many keys, we call them keys, to the teachings in the school here. And as a guide, it's my privilege and honor to open that door and to create a space for these conversations to happen, to bring in the age-old wisdom that has helped society traverse all the ups and downs and developments and breakdowns and growth that we've experienced in our culture. And it's been here for thousands of years because it helps people navigate changing times, which changes the constant, right? So, you know, if you're looking to reclaim your power by bringing back passion and purpose into your life, that's what these teachings are all about. I encourage you to reach out to me at my contact information and continue that conversation.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
And,
yeah, my website is spiritintransition.com. So come check me out. And thank you so much for having me, Graciela and Julieta. And looking forward to hearing more of these wonderful episodes. Now, I've already watched a few in preparation. I can't wait to watch more. So.
Thank you, Matthew.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you guys for tuning in. And we love you guys so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us today and keeping us in the top 10% of podcasts in the world.
Ask us how you can promote your business on this podcast as a sponsor, and make sure you check out the show notes for details on how to get in touch with Julieta, Graciela, or today's special guest.
We're sending you lots of love and gratitude. Have a magical day.